Welcome to another edition of Guitar City Talks. I've been really looking forward to this one myself. Oli Whitworth has produced 4 of my albums, and we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about him and about the fact that he's kind of a specialized recording engineer and producer for classical guitar. Oli, how are you doing today? It's so nice to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm doing well, thank you, Johannes. How are you?
I'm quite well, thank you. It is, and for you guys who are out there, we're going live now. So if you're watching this live, do please send in your questions. It's a great opportunity to ask Oli anything about the recording. But anyway, we're going to get a little bit more into this talk, and I would like to say that we should probably start a little bit from the beginning. And actually, we need to kind of explain here perhaps a little bit about your background, where, of course, your mother is, Alison Bendy, is a guitar teacher and also a guitar performer. And, of course, your father is also is kind of a little bit famous within especially in the UK, for the educational world, in having produced The Guitarist Way, right? So
with Peter Nuttall as well.
With Peter Nuttall, and you're also been kind of in kind of not direct family, but also very related to Gerald Garcia, of course.
Who I have a lot to thank him for, and my mum and dad as well.
Sure. And of course, another time we will have Gerald also in one of these talks too. It will be phenomenal. But so this is maybe a silly question, but so did they start you off with The Guitarist Way, sort of, to learn?
No, so it's always been played around me when I was a kid, probably even before I was born. I was listening to it in guitar lessons and stuff. But I started off on the violin when I was about 8.
Oh.
And a good 4 years before I picked up a guitar properly, I'd say. And
I see.
Yes, a bit of guitar. I actually started with Oasis. I got into guitar through
Oasis. I
I
see. That's quite interesting. So your parents actually didn't necessarily want you to become a guitarist.
Yeah, would anyone?
Well,
no, not necessarily. There was, obviously, music was around the house. They were keen on music, and I was put into dance and singing lessons as a kid. So I think the arts was always
fantastic,
a big part of my life, no matter what. But yeah, I took to the violin.
Violin.
I was inspired by Jane Gordon, I think, when I was probably about 7 or 8. Don't know if you know her.
Awesome. Yes, sure.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think, and then I saw that through to the end of school, and then guitar was my thing, sure.
Awesome. But you said you started with electric guitar, or what?
Yeah, well, it wasn't electric at that point. It was just on a classical guitar, a tiny one, this big, half size, and just learned the chords for Wonderwall. And then soon, when my parents saw that I was quite keen on guitar, then book 1.
Awesome. Book 1. There it was.
Yeah, and then after a few years of that, I had quite a quick learning curve, because there's obviously quite a lot of understanding about the guitar just from...
I would imagine you already knew those songs if you heard them your whole life. By the time you started learning them, they would just fall very easily.
I could read music already from from violin lessons.
Right.
So I took to it quite quick. And I do, in my life, I enjoy that quick rise to a reasonable level, like grade 5 level of anything I set my heart to. And I like to get to that level, and then things get a bit harder, and then I kind of give up. And I saw it through for I did grade 5, and then I just got really into either electric guitar or recording as well. Those two things.
Well, this is the thing. So that came in at some point, this kind of passion for recording, and I guess it started off with you recording yourself and
some close friends as well. So band style recordings on a 4-track tape machine.
Oh, cool. Well, anyway, before we are going to get all into that, but it is nice just to confirm that since your parents were so involved in The Guitarist Way, I guess it is like with toothpaste. If the owner of the toothpaste factory gives his own toothpaste to his own children, then means that it's good. So I guess in this case, they did use The Guitarist Way on their own children. So there we go. It is a good book. Anyway, that was a sidetrack. But let's now get in a little bit to this, because we're going to get back to the past. Now it's going out of hand a little bit, but that's all right. let's just get to it. So, what is it that is a little bit different about recording, in particularly the classical guitar, compared to other recording projects?
Well, within the classical recording world, not a huge amount of difference. I mean, if you're recording a grand piano or a choir or orchestra, there's a lot of parallels, a lot of things to take from one thing to the other. But it's quite different from, sort of home studio rock and roll recording or live band recording or anything like that. It's quite different there. But the thing about the guitar is it's quite a quiet instrument compared to the grand piano, brass instruments. It's really quite hard to record without a low level of background noise or quiet microphones and equipment, because the hiss just in proportion to the actual instrumental sound would be quite dominating. But these days it's less of an issue than probably was with tape machines and whatnot. So hiss probably less of an issue now, but you still need to keep an eye on the technical noise levels and whatnot because of the quietness. But then it's quite susceptible to it doesn't sound great in a small room, really. It needs a bit of space to breathe. It's quite a complex instrument that overtones project in different ways, and you've got the sort of the fret noise one hand and the picking sound at the other end, and
yeah, I guess that the thing about the guitar, like I say, it is that, like you say, it is a quiet instrument. I think of it as a little bit like the problem is, I mean, all instruments are noisy. I mean, a piano they're basically hammers, they're pedal noise, they're all kinds of things, but the instrument is so loud, of course, that you don't. The problem with the guitar is that it's not very noisy, but every instrument is noisy, but compares with the actual sound. But of course, if you would completely remove it, then also you wouldn't sound like a guitar, I guess.
Yes. So you're not trying to avoid it completely, but sometimes minimize. It depends a lot on the player and the instrument. Breathing can be a problem as well.
Breathing, yes.
Breathing,
I know it is the problem, but it does keep us alive, though. If we don't breathe, we don't. No, and I know you did it, because here we are going to talk a lot about our recordings. This is why I'm so happy about this session, because this feels very close to me, because we produced 4 albums together, which is quite awesome, and also in a pretty short amount of time. But I guess I do know that I sometimes do breathe far too much during recording, especially during difficult passages. I think we had a few moments where you kind of, on the voice there, went like, stop breathing some. I don't know, but generally speaking, with your recordings, of course, it's never been really a problem. Is that something you take in consideration to avoid the mouth area, or can we...
Sometimes I'd rather have the better guitar sound with a bit of breathing than really compromise the guitar sound to get rid of the breathing, for sure. But I will absolutely have no problem choosing a different take because the breathing's a bit more subtle. If I notice a loud breath, I'll check the other takes we've recorded and swap it out if need be. But only if the music still flows naturally. It sounds good.
And of course,
but it's something to consider the whole time, I think.
And at least my experience with working with you, of course, and I think that is something when it comes to classical guitar recordings. Of course, now we're talking sound engineer, producer. In some cases, these can be different people, but for classical guitar recording, it's just one person. And let's say that the person you're working with, in most cases, they need to know guitar. And I think this is, of course, you know guitar very well and from a very early age. So it's kind of actually an enormous, advantage working with you.
I wouldn't say my repertoire knowledge is high, though. Every album I record has loads of pieces I've never heard before, and I have to kind of learn them on the spot. So I can score read fine, and I'll research them beforehand, but I don't have quite that level of...
No, but no, it doesn't have to be too modest. But I mean, it really means that,
use my ears and see what's
your ears.
And talk with you.
I mean, this is, if you don't know, I mean, we are in a session, and you'll tell me your D string has to be a little sharp to sound. This is a kind of a very specific knowledge that is for...
Yeah, the intonation might be off.
Yeah, and I think it also has to do with which is another subject we can develop more in the future also, of course, because anyway, I would like to for let's see also if there might be some questions coming in. You guys don't forget that you can ask questions. I think we are live on Facebook. I think that Facebook was a bit slow on getting on the live,
Okay.
But I think we're on there now. But you guys who are listening, I mentioned earlier, but maybe then it wasn't live yet. This is a great opportunity here. We're going to get into that a little bit later too, because of course Oli does a lot of after production services too, but also if you guys are out there, you're recording at home, this is a great opportunity to ask tips, or if you have some specific problems, or we're going to get into that a little bit about home recording. So I think for a lot of people out there, you might have actually really good questions, so don't be shy and just send them in. But we're going to do a little bit of a show off here by sharing some tracks, not complete. We're going to show you a few examples of albums that we done together. And of course, our very first album was China. And we're going to hear here this is a transcription I made of a traditional classical Chinese piece called Moonlit Night on Spring River. And why did I choose this example? Well, this recording, which is most of our recordings have been done in the Challow Park studio, which is quite a large space. It's a square cube, right? And I'm kind of sitting somewhere in the middle. And
Gerald Garcia
was on co-producing this album with us.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it was a great fun, and it was a great production. This set off our journey. After that, we just continued. But I think this really, we'll talk about that more in a minute. But let's just hear it and not talk so much. So here we go. I think you can hear it. I mean, it's a very dramatic piece, and
it's my favourite on the album. I love it. When it came together, when I first listened to the complete edits, it's definitely a goosebump moment for me.
I remember that, yeah.
Because I'm so used to hearing a piece of music all segmented when editing, and hearing the kind of the troublesome areas over and over again, rather than the whole picture. That only when I listen all the way from the beginning to the end do I really sort of hear it in its full glory. It's very nice.
That is very true, and I think that is again when we talk about like who's going to be your recording engineer. It is a kind of, or producer. It's kind of a pretty. You need to feel quite comfortable with that person. Like you say, there's going to be trouble spots, and you're going to have to sit there and with me wait it out until we get at least one perfect take. So this is a kind of pretty important dynamic, and I must say there, in that respect, you've always been very awesome to work with. That way, the patience and the kindness, because of course you're in there in the studio and you kind of want to destroy a guitar, and you know it's very important to have somebody that is there with you rather than put any more pressure. That's basically, I think, for a recording artist, is the worst situation. You're in a studio and you feel you can't do it, and people are starting to put pressure on you. Or how do you view that? I guess sometimes you need to put pressure on the player to get out of them what you need.
That doesn't come naturally from me. I don't think that'd be my approach ever. Well, if time's running out and it needs to be finished, then I try and make that clear. I think what happened once.
You guys, you get it sorted now.
I mean, sometimes just finishing it is more important than getting some perfection. If time is a limit, if you've got a set studio time booked.
And what always what surprises me is I'm in the studio and I think, oh my god, we need to... And then the thing is, then we go to the studio and you do your magic and you say, oh, but you cut a little bit from there and there, and then it sounds really quite... oh, we did have it, you know, and as a player, you don't realize also what kind of magic goes on back there. And I think this is something we have to realize for a lot of, like me, not actively performing now, but most of these albums were made were basically made a little bit on a pressure right before a tour. And of course, if I would have recorded that album after the tour, maybe it would have been way smoother. It's sometimes you have to go into the studio and it's a little fresh, and you have to rely on you. Although I can actually play it perfectly from the beginning to end, I know that you can fix that. Right?
And I think doing it before a tour, I think recording is an extreme form of practice, I think. You kind of discover things about the piece and playing it that you wouldn't just by playing it live over and over again. So maybe it's, really helps the tour to have recorded beforehand as well.
Oh, totally. I'm totally with you. I just feel sorry for you having to listen to my unpracticed. Guys, I need to practice this for 5 minutes. Well, anyway, then we moved on to actually produce... which is a very Eternal Dream. The Eternal Dream is a very important album to me, because these are all my kind of, it's not just all my own compositions, but it's a kind of a collection of some of my favorites over the last, already some music had already been written 10 years before we produced that album, so that was an important one for me. Of course, Eternal Dream is the main track, and then we're just going to hear it now, and I think here we really managed to get quite a powerful sound. Do you want to say something about this before we hear it, or should we just go ahead?
Yeah, I kind of built on the sound from China, but I didn't change a lot from the recording techniques and production techniques, but I think I just went for a bit of a less warm sound even, but not in a bad way, a bit brighter and louder in a way. I think China came out quite mellow.
I think we kind of went almost like the sound was a little closer. Could that be? That's my feeling with Eternal Dream.
I can't remember the measurements of where exactly microphones were, but yeah,
no.
Essentially.
Anyway, let's hear it. It's just a very, very powerful sound. Let's hear it now. Say I'm really pleased with that recording, the sound there. It is close, but there's a lot of sort of space there, and maybe this is where I think maybe many musicians don't realize. Maybe we think that we can go into a studio and then we can make magic, but to some degree the room is very important, right, when it comes to really high.
For sure. I say it's perfect for classical guitar in terms of reverberation.
Yeah, Challow Park. So that is kind of a monstrous studio. We're going to see a little bit of a video clip later from that place. But you say it's perfect for classical guitar, and I agree with you as soon as I played there, of course. But at first,
my taste.
When I first came in there, I thought, wow, this is huge, because it's basically you get this. It's like an enormous square, right? It's equal size.
No, it's not.
No.
It's specifically not as well. It's magic dimensions, I think.
Oh, it has magic dimensions. Oh,
yeah,
I like the magic dimensions.
Measured out, I think, but not to be a cube. But it's a large space with parallel walls, but with lots of subtle variety and whatnot to break up the reflections. It does sound nice, and there's quite a lot of movable absorptive panels as well that can control the sounds.
We're going to see a video of that. And then, of course, we should already say that we also made one album where we didn't. It was actually my choice. I said this time I wanted to try to do a smaller space. And actually, anyway, we actually do have some questions here. So, a lot. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for being here. Normally the Guitar City Talks are actually pre-recorded, but today we wanted to... because we think it's such a great opportunity to have Oli here, and actually instead of just hearing my questions, we can actually ask him your questions. So, also they said that apparently they couldn't hear our... Was that work? Somebody would say if there is a problem with some other technical, send me a text here. But anyway, we have Akash here. For those of us who have access to a small recording booth, which is really dead. How do we go about recording the classical guitar? Very good question, Akash.
Yeah, well, it depends how big it is, but with a dead acoustic, you can pull the microphones back a little bit until you can hear the, what little acoustic there is. You don't want to hear too much of that close room sound, the small room sound. So get as far away as you can from the instruments before you do start to hear what room there is. And then you're going to have to rely on artificial reverberation and a lot of it. And spend some time looking for good reverbs for the guitar. I use an impulse response of the Barbican in London. And a Cathedral as well sometimes. I found a couple that suit me and my style a lot, which I use on.
So that is a software, right? That copies, make a replica. Yeah, it's fascinating. And is that but that's a paid software, right? If somebody's out there and they...
Yeah, maybe £30 kind of pays.
One time. Oh, well, that's not too bad then.
I think so. I think for the Waves one I've used quite a lot, IR1. It's
Fantastic.
very, very old. I was using it when I was working for as a sound designer for a computer games company in 2006.
Oh.
So it's very old, and still charging for it. But it works.
So you're saying we're in a small room. So what were you saying is you need to back up until you can.
Yeah, you do anyway with classical guitar recording, not pop recording. Classical recording, you need to get some space from the guitar as much as you can get away with.
I see.
Or you hear the negative sound of a small room. Negative. So, get as far away as you can, but you have to make a judgment call. Ideally, like 1.5 to 2 meters, but that's unlikely in a small room, I think.
So one of the advantages of the bigger room is we can go more far away from the guitar. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Interesting.
There's fewer surfaces in proximity to the guitar microphone, so you can get those surfaces can smear the sound a bit, and without those surfaces, you've got a floor. That's fine. One's okay. Well, one's great actually. And then as you come further away, you still don't hear those walls in quite the same way. You hear them as a lovely washy reverb rather than a very similar to the guitar sound, very similar sound, which smears the actual clear guitar sound that you're trying to capture usually. But it's all taste. If you like that sound, the small room, go for it. It's art.
But I mean, that is interesting. We have some more questions here. We're gonna get back to that a little bit later when we talk about our very latest recording where we actually chose to be in a smaller space. So that we're gonna get back to that.
Yeah, we have some. Also, one more thing on that, which is very important, is to choose microphones that really predominantly pick up sound from the front. So cardioid, they're called. Those microphones will pick up less of the
cardioid, which means
cardioid.
Fantastic, cardioid. Yeah. No, so much information. Well, let's go ahead here. We have actually very, very nice questions. This is a good one. What mics are most suited for classical guitar? So if you're in a dream situation here, you can get whatever you want. What would you get?
Oh, this will take a bit of time here. So condenser microphones I prefer, which are very articulate, generally not much noise, not much hiss to them, but some inferior ones can be. But yeah, condenser microphones pick up the details much more than a dynamic microphone, which is what you might have on a stage for vocals, or some home studio recording might use dynamic microphones, but they tend to be too low outputs, and then the hiss can come up with that. So avoid dynamic microphones. Condensers are good. Ribbon microphones can sound really nice, but for me, I've always had hiss problems with classical guitar with them because they require a lot of volume boost, which brings up the hiss from the other bits of equipment. Ooh. They don't inherently have hiss, but the equipment after it has some, and then as you turn it up, that comes up, which is a shame because they do sound really nice and warm. But then, so condenser microphones come in different shapes and sizes, and the smaller ones, actually, I've got one here. These.
Ooh,
this kind of size. You get
exciting.
All the time they're used on classical guitars, and they work great. This one is omnidirectional, so it picks up sound from all around, all sides. But some are more
fabulous. That's one of the ones that we used. I recognize that. And what is the brand?
Yeah, the last 2 albums, I think. or maybe just last one or two.
And what is that?
That's a Shirts CNC6U 2H, the 2H cat.
And so you would say this is the best one? Or?
No. There's loads of fantastic microphones. It's just one that I chose, but you can get really good ones for £100 or £200 or dollars. They're pretty good. These are more
I guess here's the thing, right? You can go from, like you say, you can spend maybe like $100, or you could easily, there are microphones that cost, I don't know, 10, 20, like that, 30. There's no limit, right? Or
yeah,
how expensive they can be.
You get a lot of hiss, but there's a certain level and certain brands which do a very good low level, like low cost, high-ish quality microphone that fairly hard to floor. But generally, I mean, the more expensive ones, if it's the right microphone for the job, will sound just a little bit better. But it's so often not the weakest link in a recording that it's, it's my job. So I've chosen the ones that, that suit my budget, and I want reliability and good servicing and all sorts, rather than something that might flake out on the job. But it's not such an issue for people at home.
But yeah, if you don't have, so if you cannot afford really good, that's a good question, I think. If you are, because of course, if you have the budget, then of course there's a lot of choices. But let's say if you don't have if you just want to get started with home recording, like, what can you do if you only have, say, a couple of $100 to spend, or that's like $100 is like £5. Such a good transaction rate now. It's very bad.
Go for handheld recorders like a Zoom. I think I've got one around.
Oh, interesting. But still, if you wanted to go with microphones, I know the Zoom
microphones built in, and you got two that are
no, I do know. I had one of those myself. I had a Sony recorder that we used for many videos, but I did find that it was quite good, but actually, as a matter of fact, I think I have used some of those and sent to you, and you fixed them. And of course, then it was nice, but before.
That's it. The Zoom one that I've used, and people have sent me recordings themselves of Zoom. And did you say yours was Zoom or a different one?
Oh, I think it was a Sony, actually. Sorry.
Sony. Okay. They're completely serviceable. There's no inherent massive problems with it. It'll work.
I see.
The right place. Placement is key, really. But
interesting.
It's nice to have these other microphones and stuff. But for low level, a Zoom is good. And some microphones, I think I've got around. Hold them up. Yeah, these. I was empty, but these Line Audio microphones, which are made in Sweden, I think. That's empty, but it would fit in there. And they're really nice. They're about 100 and something each. So that's a couple of hundred.
Well, this is what I'm having here, I think. This is actually, I think that is, oh no. No, these are called CM3.
Oh, okay, so this is OM1, but I've got the CM4s, which is what I meant to hold up.
Oh.
Either is good. So they're basically the same as the CM3, but I think the parts ran out on the CM3, so they had to...
Yeah, these are old. I had them for like 15 years more. And I think they
Line Audio CM3, they're old. Vintage.
It's made in Sweden. Yeah, like me.
Yeah, they're very good. They'll do the job. Like, if I can't make a good recording with those, they're not the problem at all.
I see, yeah. Then maybe it's, of course, yeah, it's also so many things. This is the guitar, it's the room, the player, the music, yeah, the arrangement. There's so many aspects to it. But we do have some, I just want to pop up though, since we were talking about, I found it here on my phone. I remember I had an old Instagram post from our recording session. This is not the last one, but a few years back. And I just thought it was so cool. It looked so beautiful the way you had set up these microphones. Wow.
Those are the bigger ones, right?
Well, they're two, and they're placed kind of. Oops.
Yeah, I'm talking.
I should have prepared. But sideways, and then you have some, of course, more microphone. We're using also some back there. But this, I think, it's really beautiful picture. I just remember that. And those are Neumann microphones.
The first album. I set up
no, this is the third.
Okay, yeah, so that was these.
Chinese memories.
So the bigger microphones, the thing about those, which I do like, is again, they have generally a bit less hiss than these would. these aren't hissy, but when you're dealing with very quiet instruments, sometimes a bit less noise is good. And the ones that I use there are kind of mid-size, and they have a balance of articulation. The small ones tend to be a bit quicker to respond, a little bit. It's so subtle. I'm not even sure I can tell the difference all the time, ever. But the big one's a bit slower to respond. So you might lose a tiny bit of accuracy or detail, but the noise is lower. And the ones that I've got, I really like the sound. They're very smooth sounding.
Yeah, I mean, we've been getting very smooth.
Well to processing. They sound good.
And smooth.
And then you can get bigger and bigger ones, which tend to, again, have less hiss. But
I see. Well, there are more questions here. Give me a second here, just because I don't want to let the people. Steve says here, yeah, he agrees on us on this with the CM that they are great microphones. He says very good for the money. But he has one more question, and this this is a little bit beyond my understanding, I think. How much weight is in the recording of the source, or how much is in the mixing? I don't even know what that means. Weight.
Yeah, well, how important
Steve,
is the stage? Oh, God.
Jeffrey, asking that.
I really love post-production, and I will do whatever I can to just, if something makes it sound better, I'm not going to resist doing it. And it's a very non-purist approach I take. So, I think dramatic changes are possible in editing, and depends on the recording quality. I'm dealing with, right now, recordings done on people's phones of an orchestra, one of those Zoom video style things where everyone's sending their recordings and videos to me, and I'm working with quite low quality audio, but what you can do with software is quite phenomenal.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Sounding pretty good. So, but
yes, but here we have to understand. No, must be. I understand that it goes to a certain point you can do a lot, but of course, it's a limit, right? And it's where it comes the quality.
If there's hiss and noise and rumble and distortion as well, distortion's very hard to get.
Yes.
You need to make sure the levels are low. Although sometimes distortion can be.
So what is he talking? What is Steve? So what is Steve actually asking here? Steve Jeffers, how much weight? What's that mean? Weight.
How important is each stage? Is it more important to get the recording right or fix it afterwards? I mean,
wait. Now I understand. Now I understand the question. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. If the recording's great, you don't have to do anything afterwards, and it's nice.
Interesting.
Just to get it right at the start.
But
you
this
can't really in a tiny room. You're always going to have to add reverb or EQ and stuff in a small room.
Well, that comes perfect, because Akash is asking another question here. How different is classical guitar mixing versus the usual advice giving for guitar mixing? Compression, EQ. Because this is the thing, right? In pop music, you would use quite a lot more compression and quite a lot more EQ. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and for classical recording, if it needs some, I would say straight up compression is very, very rare. Much more likely is an EQ, a dynamic EQ, which is a sort of compressor, but it detects if a particular note or frequency is getting a bit out of control, it will EQ that note out temporarily, just put it down into control, and then let it come back up. So you don't lose that timbre in general, you just lose it for the notes. And with a guitar, you've got your third string, G sharp, which always booms, and an A potentially as well, second fret. They're very boomy notes when recording close up. I always come across that. I don't know if you had the same experience, but a dynamic EQ on those frequencies can just level them out, make them sound a bit more consistent.
Fantastic.
With the string, and the fret 3, fret 4 is kind of okay as well. But
that's a great advice. So you mean that you work on that particular range?
Yeah, a lot. And
yeah, this true. Guitar mid, yeah. The mid is maybe the worst.
So say again.
No, I think there was a small delay. We're over talking each other here. This conversation is going out of control. No, you go ahead. This is too exciting.
Yeah, there's always going to be booming notes or notes that are quite weak just because of the room or the guitar generally. I think room is often to blame. It'll suck certain notes out and boost others. So, yeah, some EQ to add in, some extra power to maybe the first fret on the 6th string is weak. The F could just be gone. So you just add an EQ to bring that back up a bit. All sorts can be necessary. It's really nice to get an even bass note sound and an even third string sound particularly. The top string's not such an issue. But getting those mellow with processing. But not straight up compression. This is quite tailored compression. And there are now plugins that can kind of do it automatically a bit, if you know what you're doing, which has sped up my workflow a bit. So you're using some specialist plugins that look out for boomy frequencies and sort them out for you, which is nice.
Yeah, and then it has to be said too. I mean, I don't want maybe not talk too much about it, but that this, like you're talking about the technology, there are also situations where I know that we have been able to take out unwanted fret noise and many other things, correct? This actually can do, I mean, squeak noise and all kinds of things that you can actually do. It's quite incredible. But is there a danger there if you use it too much? Could it sort of damage the recording in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally the way that I would address the squeak is to find the band of frequencies, the area of the sound which is where the squeak is, and then temporarily reduce that just for that half a second. But that will also affect the guitar tone briefly. But generally, because there's a squeak over the top, you won't notice the guitar suffering unless you're cutting it too much. So it's it works best when you need it least, really. You can get away with reducing the fret noise by like 25% less quite easily without noticing it. But when you want it gone completely, it's very hard to get rid of completely. Well, impossible without using an edit or something to edit to a different take.
Fantastic. But if we get back to this question, then what Akash is asking here, then how should we approach like just generally, you say when you're mixing classical guitar, because I guess what he's saying here is that the advice he's been getting is it's more from pop people, and he's not getting it right. That's what I'm feeling here. And I think that's his question is now. So are there any guidelines that are really applicable just for classical guitar in the mixing?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to listen to recordings you like the sound of and compare and see how they sound. And I think a lot of the guidance for pop music is generally to compress things so things stay audible all the time, but classical music is about dynamics a lot of the time, but not being overly dynamic so that the quiet subtleties are lost completely. So you want to kind of bring up the quiet sections, but rather than using compression to make the louder sections quieter, use some manual automation of bringing the volume up in the quieter bits to bring those out, or manually dropping the louder bits down just to reduce the dynamic range a bit if it's needed, but not using straight up compression, which is it changes everything. It changes the relationship between the attack and the sustain of the instrument if you compress, which is dangerous. But it can sound cool if you like it, but a lot of people aren't after that, I think, with their classical recordings. They want natural.
No, I remember this.
Life rather than changed character completely.
I remember this because I was, I don't know, I remember with some albums, I always like my albums to sound very good in the car, because then I know that a lot of the people that would buy my CDs after the concert, they'll pop it in the car. But of course now the problem is that the cars are stopping to have CD players. But anyway, at that time that was important to me. So I remember you did, because I wanted the whole volume to go up. So what you're saying is what you actually did was, rather than just compressing, what we should do is just do individual tailor compressing on the louder bits so that we can bring the entire track up as it is.
So the compression that I think the chap's talking about there is it's an automatic process that automatically reduces the dynamic range itself. But I'm saying, do it manually, control it yourself, be in control. You're not after that automatic sound. It does sound different, but it can be good.
Absolutely.
For the car, bring the whole volume up. I think for that I just brought the whole volume up and maybe limited the very top of the sound to not go above a certain level, but that I'm going to do quite carefully. I'm not sure exactly, but I would have been careful, I think.
Well, Steve Jeffrey here has another question here. The sound of the example you played sounded incredible. Loads of space and closeness, but it says, but if I used the same microphones in the same room, I'm sure I would not get such good results. Well, so what he's saying here, so this is the thing. You got the microphones, you got the place, you got the player, but where you put it is essential, right? I mean, if you just would back off 1 meter, maybe the sound would be terrible.
Yeah, you need to be able to hear what you're recording when you're doing it to get that distance right. That's very important. And It's harder on headphones than it is on speakers, I've got to say. I've recorded things where I've done it on headphones and then gone home, and it just sounds, when I listen on speakers, it sounds more distant than I had anticipated. Headphones seem to make everything just sound a bit more immediate, which is, my fault always. It's never a deal breaker, but it's still a little bit of a surprise. So maybe think about that when you're recording on headphones, which most people do on headphones.
But I do know,
it's partly because you're hearing if you're on headphones, often you're in the same room as the performer.
right?
You're hearing things a bit different.
But now let's talk about
I can't work in headphones very well now. Just so used to speakers.
But that's already, you're in the other room. I think what he's saying, like, how would you even... I mean, I know in your case, for example, you're very specific. You even measure the distance from the microphones. Like, obviously, this is a very precise science, how far it should be in that room. And where should I sit in that room?
It's generally, I've kind of go into a session with some ideas of how I want to set up, and I've either taken some measurements from a previous recording session I've done, and I want to match that and go from there. Or when I'm measuring them after I like the sounds and I'm writing down where they are. But I often do three microphones at the front setup these days, which isn't necessary, but this is what I like. And I want to make sure those three are the same distance apart for whatever reason. I don't know. Just
makes sense.
Balance. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
But the distance does make a difference. The wider you have your microphones, the more spacious things can sound, but you run the risk of the guitar not being, you can't really hear where it's coming from. It's just a bit everywhere and a bit off to one side, 1 minute, off the other next, or kind of in both at the same time. So getting that distance right where the guitar is clearly occupying the middle of the sound, but there's reverb by the side is quite important. You can do that. You can do that with 2 microphones. I go with 3, but 2 is fine. You can't do it with 1.
Fabulous.
You need to have at least 2 for guitar, really, I think. Well, you can. There are tricks you can do with processing afterwards, but I think 2 is a quite important starting place. And both of them the same distance from the guitar. They're not an arbitrary point on the guitar. They're quite a specific point on the guitar that you've got to discover yourself where the main body of the sound comes from, which isn't actually the guitar.
Do you mean that it's different for each guitar, or there is a secret here that you're going to tell us?
Yeah, that's sort of a secret. I don't know. You can work it out yourself with. That's very hard on your own. You need someone playing guitar and to move around. But I've found the center of the sound isn't the sound hole, and it's not up here in the sort of middle of the guitar, but it tends to be kind of this area. And on a steel string guitar, which has a slightly bigger body oftentimes, even lower down. So this point is where I hear the sound coming from. And if you have your microphone set up like in front like this, then a bit further away, this one is going to be closer to that center point, and the whole sound will move off to...
So the bridge is like your center point of sound, like sound center point.
Different guitars.
Fascinating.
When you've recorded the sounds and you can look at the 2 different microphones, you might see that one is louder or slightly ahead on the screen, just moves a little bit, and then you can use the visual clues as to line them up and then move microphones an inch or so just to get those waveforms exactly lined up. And that's generally what I'm faffing around with for half an hour when I'm starting to record a guitar, is just getting those lined up. Using your ears as well, but visual cues are really helpful these days.
Yeah, I do remember you often if I remember right, we start off, I'll play a little bit in our recording sessions, and then you kind of walk around and listen in different spots a little bit, right? To orientate yourself in...
Yeah, it's overrated.
Oh, you just do that to seem professional. So, he's really good. He's really paying attention. Yeah. Actually, just thinking about what you're going to have for dinner.
I do move around, but what's about headphones, I find if you find a sweet spot by moving around and listening, the sweet spot really is a bit closer than that. Your brain is very good at discarding sound from behind and focusing on what's in front, but microphones don't necessarily do that so well. So being a bit closer helps the recording kind of...
So where it sounds good to the ears, and then you go a little bit closer.
I do. I think
that sounds about...
It sounds right to me.
We have more questions here. People are so much questions here. Here, coming back a little bit, I think people want a little bit more straightforward advice here. Is there a certain process you always go through while mixing classical guitar? Is there like a standard? Is there any kind of rules of thumb here?
Yeah, I like to get a good sound up as quickly as possible and then tweak it a lot. But and I would like to do that first before I even edit. If there's going to be editing, like just get a reasonable sound with some reverb. It's just a bit more pleasing to listen to and a better representation of how things are going to sound. And then get all the edits sorted and then go into the fine tweaking. And the process generally is, for me, listening through, removing resonances or dealing with every resonant note that just sticks out. And it's that third string, the first fret, or even the open string, first fret and second fret. And what I hear in the car when I listen to classical guitar music a lot, and the mistakes I made on my very early recordings, way before yours, Johannes, when I was doing guitarist way backing tracks and stuff, is that those notes boom in the car so much. It just seems to be the resonant frequency of it.
Did you make those?
Well. No. Deal with those. I don't seem to notice it so much with a real guitar in a real room, but when you lock onto it, they're definitely boomy. Most guitars. You deal with those, go through, check bass notes are fairly even, and then just adjust some EQ to get a nice timbre, a nice balance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some different pieces require different sound. Maybe not. It's nice if they don't, but depends on the repertoire. And then tweak until it's sounding perfect. Really, as good as you can get. Getting the right reverb counts for a lot. And if you're recording in a dry space, you can get away with so much more in editing because you haven't got the reverb tails of the recording to deal with. All that reverb happens afterwards.
Interesting.
You can get away with a lot more.
Very interesting.
If you coughed during a take, the echo of the cough would wipe out that take for
right.
a good second or two. But on a small acoustic, it's gone. But yeah, getting nice reverb counts. There's so many reverbs, so many settings. Just spend some time, find out what you like, listen to recordings. I like the Barbican impulse response from IR1, the Waves plugin, and I think it's from IR1. And there's a St. Paul's Cathedral, which I use for longer reverb. Get those in place, and might have to mix some reverbs as well. Some sound really good just for general fast passages and normal play, but in the really slow bits where you want a bit of extra sustain, you might want to have a longer reverb as well, or instead, and you can just bring the long reverb up for the slower passages, but then duck it away for the louder bits, or the faster bits, where it can become a bit washy, which you can't do in a recording in a cathedral so easily unless you're using room microphones at the back. It's easy to control, but
well, that is really interesting. I remember seeing a very old video with Glenn Gould where they tried to make this. He wanted different tracks to be recorded at different distances. And of course, in those days, this was very complicated. But in a sense, all that can be actually achieved with our software very easily.
Yeah, it's not quite the same as actually changing the distance of the microphones. Yeah, it's very hard to really make it sound like the microphones are further away. You have to put a lot of reverb on to cover up the sounds of the actual room you're in. You have to put quite a lot on. So I don't know. Your mileage.
No, bad track. I was just remembering that.
Yeah.
I remember he was trying to do, the microphone was supposed to, during he played the piece, they had to move it closer to him.
During the piece?
Yes, this kind of, and of course that is quite hard to do in reality, but in some ways nowadays you can, if you wanted to, one can achieve that kind of thing, right? You start dry and then actually, of course, maybe you don't want it on classical guitar. I'm getting carried away. But there are so many questions here. I need to read them out. Steve again here. Now he says, great advice. He says he usually mics around the 12th fret, not the bridge. So do we recommend him here to... He says he has a recording session this afternoon. Wish me luck. So maybe he should try that then. I find it really interesting with the bridge. Of course, I know you're not a very big fan of course, contact microphones, but of course that is the place you put the contact microphone, obviously, because that's where you're really getting all the... And I mean, if you put your hand on the bridge, that's how you create pizzicato, right? Pizzicato.
The strings joins the guitar, so makes sense that there's quite a lot going on there.
I think, I mean, also in terms of guitar construction, if you look at it, of course, that is because of the size, and that is where you would have the most vibration, and around that area is then the guitar gets smaller, of course. So that naturally, it's going to sound less from the smaller part than the big part. You also on purpose make the wood more resonant there, particularly with double top constructions, where you particularly hollow out those areas to create that incredible sound. Anyway, there's so many questions here.
Can I come back to that
Of
12
course,
fret
as
thing?
much.
Because,
I'm gonna
no,
switch
12
back
fret's
to you
not-
also. Wait, here, there you go.
12 fret's not a problem necessarily. I mean, if it's classical recording, then you probably want 2 mics around there rather than the one. But because pop recording tends to be like 1 around 12 fret pointing the guitar. But you're going to get at that area, you're going to get a bit more fret noise, probably a bit more breathing noise, slightly. I think you get kind of clearer sounds around there. It's so I think for your recordings, Johannes, I've kind of gone that side of the guitar rather than the body side, but still pointing towards the center point. So
I get it.
It's looking across the front of the guitar a little bit towards the bridge, and then measuring the pair of microphones to be equidistant from the bridge still. But if you then go bring microphones to the other side, pointing at the body from the guitar again. So the microphone's on this side, then you'll get less fret noise, less mouth noise and breathing. But it's up to you if you like the tone.
Breathing again. Yeah, that's true.
Tone over here, and slightly up above as well, looking down. Just, there we go. About there. About 1.5 meters or so away.
Interesting.
Not this close. But it depends on the room.
Because also...
It depends.
Of course, but I know also we should probably explain that too. I think in our recordings too, there was those microphones, but then you also had some other microphones in the back of the room to capture the ambience, right? Is that correct? Quite a lot of microphones.
Good luck with your recording this afternoon. Yes.
Yes, Steve. Good luck with your recording.
I like a bit more control in post-production mixing, so I put room mics up. Even in my small room here in the studio, I put some room mics up.
Room mics.
But in a nice studio, they just sound glorious. You know, you can bring them up to taste, and as long as there's not much background noise, then they can just they just sound so real and live. But with a small room, I still put room mics up because they capture different overtones from the close mics. They can still pick up a more balanced sound, but it's coloured by the room reflections. But then if I use those to have the reverb, so I put the reverb on those microphones, you're getting sort of slightly more realistic room mic sound, perhaps. So I've got
fabulous.
A few meters back, maybe 3 or 4 meters back from the guitar.
3 or 4 meters back.
In the small room.
Yeah, even in the small room, right?
Say again?
Yeah, even in that small room. And if you were in a bigger room, how far would the room mics be then? Even more or about same?
No, I don't know, 7 meters.
7 meters. Wow.
Yes, quite far. But it depends how you want to use them in the balance. If you want to rely mostly on the close microphones and then use those for reverb, 7 meters or more. You know, it depends. Just doesn't. It makes a difference, but the close microphones are the make or break business. Really, that's where what happens. Or you can rely on the close microphones coming back a bit and just using them to pick up the room reverb as well, which I know a lot of very good recording engineers do. They just use 2 microphones at a particular distance from the guitar. They use those to pick up the room reverberation and the direct sound, and it's just two mics. Yeah,
this I think of it as a little bit of an old-fashioned approach, but of course it's used to be the kind of course that's the thing. You have this perfect microphones and perfect place.
It's a Decca heritage kind of way of.
Interesting.
The Decca way is kind of 60 centimeters to those little pencil mics kind of thing. This might not be quite right, but
they had some standards. That's interesting, yeah. And of course,
yeah. Actually, now I think about it, I think they would use room mics as well.
Oh, well, I know.
Don't take that as advice, Joe.
No, but I do know. Having recorded for Naxos, I do know that that's the way that was done, and that was a whole kind of process to it. But of course,
that was a pair of medium-sized microphones as well. The Q80 microphones for those, and it looked like medium distance, but they were quite far apart.
Well, it's pretty it makes a very washy sound in kind of church like that. But of course, saying that, what we wanted with our recordings was something quite different. We wanted a whole other clarity, and we wanted a modern sound that was. And
I see it as a larger than life kind of sound.
Larger than life. You make me sound better. Yes.
Or even I'm not going for natural sound generally. I mean, if the guitarist wants that, then that's fine. But my default is to give the guitar some help, especially if it's not a double top.
If it's not, well, actually, I think we recorded mostly with double tops. But anyway, I want to, and that's of course another. But honestly, that's I mean, I'm also this not a whole other thing about guitar construction, but anyway, let's go move on. I want to share a little quick video because now we've been talking about Challow Park Studio and how we use that big room, and just so we get an impression, here we go. Here is a video. This is the place, right? Let's listen a little bit. From the album Chinese Memories, and this is a folk song from Xinjiang, western part of China. But anyway, you can see here the big room. Here we can actually see the microphones as you're playing. You see actually this has a huge organ in that room too, so it's obviously they use it also for recording organs. So it's a truly professional studio.
Well,
but
the studio owner plays the organ. I think that's the main reason.
Oh, that's what it is.
As well, but
the owner of the studio, just like that's, yeah, it's a quite a whole other sidetrack. But the owner, right? He just kind of had this built, kind of just as for his organ.
Yeah,
but it's something like we're talking. I mean, how much that place costed to build? I don't know. Are we talking? I mean, how many millions are we? I mean, look at that. Anyway, it's yeah. I mean, I guess it's not billions, but anyway, it's so that was a little bit so we could see that room a little bit. I'm going to play a little bit another video from another time. We recorded Welcome to the World. Sorry guys if there was some issues with the sound before. I hope now I'm getting the balance right. Well, here we really, I think, I mean, as I started that for a while, this is just a two voice, you know, it is just two notes there. In thirds, and you just hear like the whole guitar, you hear the room, you hear somehow there's so much space around the notes, right? I think personally between us, I think that the Chinese memory sound were also, because at this point I'm also using this is part of me developing also my guitars.
Oh, it's that guitar
that crazy guitar. It's that guitar.
Yeah, isn't it? I love that guitar.
That one is in China now, and actually somebody was asking about True Temperament. The plan is eventually that one was made with normal, but I want to also change the fretboard on that into True Temperament because this is a killer guitar. Don't change it.
Yeah, I love
no,
that
maybe.
guitar. I just played it for a couple of minutes, and I wasn't sure if it was novelty or whatnot, but it felt so different to what I was used to playing. It was very, very noticeable difference.
Thank you. No, that guitar is crazy good, and I mean that was it's very special. Actually, maybe the ones we have made now by the same maker, maybe even better. I have collected a special moon spruce wood, and that's a whole other talk. But we'll get to record. I'm looking forward to record actually these new guitars too with you, where we also use True Temperament, because of course your ear is very sensitive. We've had many issues where we recorded and we had to basically take certain sections, make adjustments with the tuning to work in the high positions. So I'm hoping that with this True Temperament, our next recording, maybe we can even achieve some, it's a never-ending.
Sure it's down to every player or producer's kind of judgment, really, because that out of tuneness up high or certain strings could be just classed as part of the instrument sound. People are expecting to hear that, but also if you don't like it, you don't like it, and you want it in tune, then you got to figure it out.
Well, it's all about context, really. It's really about context, and of course, it's about. It's exciting for me as an arranger to be able now to explore further uses of high position in a more secure way.
Yeah.
But anyway, of course, the guitar can go out of tune. But in a way, with the recording, CD recording, this is kind of for our next album, whatever that's going to be. We have many ideas, but that's another thing for me to try to then see what we can do with also using True Temperament. If we can, I mean, that also has to be tuned well, of course, but just curious to see what we can get out of that. But let's move. I want to now go on. Of course, that sound of Farewell from the Chinese Memories album is just gorgeous. And for anyone who's interested, this you can, of course, some of these you can hear on Spotify, but if you want the immaculate good CD sound, of course, you need to buy the CD. And that's maybe another interesting thing too about this, what happens when we turn the sound into MP3. Of course, is not the same as you're getting on the CD, right?
Yeah, these days it's I'm happy.
You should say yes, so they buy the CDs. No, I mean, what is why should you buy the CD rather than listening to your MP3 version?
Oh, I just like the physical, tangible.
But the sound, right, should be.
Yeah, for sure. And the sound quality is measurably a bit better than an MP3. But when you get some good MP3s, it doesn't pose me a problem to listen to it. Everything's there.
All right, so just don't buy my albums. Just download it for free as an MP3. Is that what you're saying? No.
High quality MP3, not for free.
High quality. Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Nowadays you have these paid services where you get high, right? Like.
But do you not sell MP3s on your website?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
So you can download those? No, but because some of the stuff is also on Spotify, of course. And
I'm not
be
sure.
also enjoyed.
It's fine for casual listening. It's fine, but if you want to really get fully immersed in high quality audio, then probably.
For example, Eternal Dream, China album. This you can hear on Spotify now, and actually this is not yet, but we're going to also actually release Chinese Memories and the City of Guitar. Spotify too, but there is of course a special feeling of having the CD. It's for me, of course, these times with no concerts, it affected the CD sales greatly because I realized that basically most of my CDs were sold after concerts as a kind of memory or as something you can bring with you. Anyway, I want to share now from our very latest album, which is the City of Guitar. So that's also a little bit, this is Guitar City Talks, and I have the City of Guitar album, which actually it's not, that was meant for big tour in China, and we still haven't actually properly launched that CD because of the Corona crisis, but here we did, and I know we've been going back and forth on that, but I mean, honestly, it's also about the style, of course, but here's where we chose, it was also a little bit, a personal reason, it was a bit earlier in the year. I like this, the studio can keep very warm, but honestly, it's also because I wanted to try to capture a more intimate sound. So here's the thing, we lose some, but we gain some, right? This is the kind of proper...
Yeah, it's different, and you're right, I mean, the real acoustics of the Challow Park studio are fantastic, and can't really compare, but this is still something good, I think.
Oh, I wanted to play one track here, which is an arrangement I made of a song from Guizhou that is actually a Miao minority folk song. All right, and here it's a kind of a very quiet tremolo going on in the background of this long sustained melody. And here's the thing where we can hear a kind of detail that I honestly think we couldn't perhaps have achieved in the larger room. So let's hear that. Where are we? Chinese members? There. No, sorry. That we heard already. Awesome. Well, to be honest, I really do like that sound we achieved there, and I wonder if this particular track, if we would have recorded in a bigger room, I think all that little detail in some way would also have been a little bit washed away. What would you say?
No, I don't think so.
No, it would just have been. No, but I mean, there was something.
Come closer with the microphones or something, but there would be a way to capture that. But I'm glad you're happy with it. That's the main thing.
But it might also be a question. Also, of course, it's a different feeling. One must be aware that playing in a big, lush acoustic can be very pleasant, but it also maybe you listen differently. And of course, as we're in the studio, my listening gets highly heightened.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, and it's not flattering playing in the room here. It's there's nothing coming back at you from the walls half a second later or anything. It's, you know, it doesn't sound, it sounds good in here to you when you're playing it. It's probably going to sound good with reverb on.
Well, I was quite happy with recording there, and I must say that, in retrospective, perhaps it's more about what type of album you want to make, and I think especially if you want to do more things with more detail, maybe things that are less classical, there's a kind of also quality in going into the smaller studio. As if you really want, I mean, like Chinese Memories, of course, was so. Those are mostly, honestly, I mean, it's mostly slow tracks with just arrangements of these dead gorgeous melodies, that just kills your heart. So, of course, in that lush big studio, we achieved really. I mean, for me, although it's a bit of this Chinese Memories, actually, we're going to record Volume 2 and 3 eventually, but in some ways, I'm personally I really love the sound of that CD, and of course, also with the guitar. But I also felt that but what I thought was wonderful during our session, there was always a kind of we had a kind of clarity a little bit. We had an idea before we set off each album, what type of sound we were going to get. I think that's what I remember.
When you record in a small room here, your hand is slightly forced with adding quite a lot of reverb on just to cover up the small room sound that you're recording in. It does you can't really make it sound like you're in a big room with just a bit of reverb in the background, because that's not enough to smother the early reflections you get from the wall. I found I've mastered some recordings done, across the sea in small rooms. They sent to me, and then I put on quite a lot of reverb just to cover up the small room sounds, make it sound like it's in a bigger space. And sometimes that's considered a bit too much, and then you back it off, and I just hear that room sound creeping in. And I feel like you do have to go above a certain threshold before the sort of the illusion is complete.
Yeah, and I think
you don't hear it.
And it's worth mentioning here, especially for those still, if you're out there listening, and thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for the questions, and there are a few more, and we're actually about to round off. This has been the longest Guitar City talk ever, because it's too interesting, and we can go on and on and on. But coming back to, what am I going to say? what is important to say that, of course, during these times, I know we just chatted about it the other day, because of Corona crisis, you haven't been doing as many recordings. But what you do, another service that people should be aware of, is if you have a recording that you just cannot make it sound as good as you want, you can actually send it to Oli, and I have done this too, and it's amazing what he can do. And as I understand, this is actually what you're mostly doing these days, because there haven't just been as much demand for guitar recording, but there's a big demand of after production.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's mostly what I'm doing, but it's mostly what I love doing it, and yeah, send them to me. I really enjoy it. It's very satisfying turning a home recording into something like it sounds like a concert hall kind of thing, and trying to convince people that it's like that. I'm fascinated by the technology that I have at my fingertips now. It's incredible.
Ooh, so you guys, if you need,
I've got quite a lot of experience doing it as well. Now I've recorded in the concert halls. I've recorded at home, well, here with you, and I know what I want to achieve concert hall wise sound. So I've got a target in mind, and I've got the tools to achieve it, I think.
Fabulous. Well, there's I want to list one last question here and again, and that is interesting because Steve again here asks, do you have a favorite room you have recorded in? Would that be Challow Park, or is there even better?
Yeah. No, definitely Challow Park. For guitar, I haven't recorded many other places. I've done there's the Jacques Dupre music room actually, which is nearby.
This is in Oxford. We should know Challow Park is in Oxford, where Oli lives. So
yeah,
if you do go there and make a recording, it's a whole fantastic trip on its own. I always love going to Oxford. It's one of my favorite cities. Also because you live there.
A great pub. But yeah, this other Jacques Dupre music room was it's a bit smaller and just not quite as good, but it's very well soundproofed, and I recorded in quite a serious storm there, and I managed to get through with minimal interference. But it used to be reasonably priced, and now I think it's gone up. It's like double what I remember it being. So it's quite a lot. So it's not low budget. But then if you're looking for a low budget hall, you're unlikely to find anywhere where you're not going to get. Well, you need good soundproofing, because you're going to get a bird in the church. You're going to get bird people. You're going to get wind noise through windows or central heating coming on. There's so many problems with recording out and about in location, and you need it just done. You've either got to pay for soundproofing we have done, or I don't know, or you go in a sort of semi-soundproof smaller room or soundproof smaller room and just.
Well, you offer all those services, of course, and I think, of course, there's something worth maybe saying here at the end that, of course, yes. Also with the question, how much CDs are sold and so on, but of course we have to remember that making our official recordings as artists, this is sort of, especially if you're an interpreting artist, this is what you leave behind. Let's say this is kind of, it's like Segovia said. He said, when you record something, it's forever, for eternity. So no pressure, but there. So of course it is worth. This is sort of the peak of our art. Let's say as classical guitarists, I would say, in a way. Of course, playing concerts, but this is what will stay. So I think that it's very. I don't see why, as a performer, you wouldn't put very high priorities on achieving the very best sounds you can get. And of course everyone has different budgets, but there's also people who are good with sponsoring, and I think if you really want to reach that goal, or there's so many ways to do it nowadays, also with crowdfunding, etc. If you want to, then I would say it is better to rent exactly the perfect place, have like I do basically. We use that place, which basically you liked, and I like you, and we are so we, it's not about this sort of important stuff, and rather than trying to save on that I think it's something that will pay back over time. The fact that you produce, this is you, this is what truly is your art. That's what I would like to say, at least.
I'm glad we found Challow Park, Johannes. I'm really glad we found it. It's definitely been a good place. It's been very good sounds and pretty good soundproofing for what we're doing as well. And when I found the place through some contacts on Facebook, actually, I went there with Gerald just to check it out, and he took his guitar and just played a couple of notes, and we just looked at each other and this sounds pretty good. this is the one. It's a relief to find somewhere so good for classical guitar recording.
Well, I'm looking forward to do there again, and I record there again. And if anyone is out there, you should know that this is, of course, a possibility to go and and travel to Oxford and record your CD there. It's something
I
would recommend.
Studios availability. That's not my place to.
No. Oh, but that's the other thing about sound. Of course, it's all sound, so it doesn't matter how it looks. Right, that's the funny thing about a place like that. It's not a concert hall; it's truly a studio. So it's all about the sounds. It's nothing about, and it is incredible.
Unless you're filming one of the tracks as well,
which we did, but it's fun. I like that. I really like that. Well, all of this has been like super informative. Also, I should say we've gone on for a long time, but there's even are some more questions. And I want to take one last question, and then I think we're about to. There's Makash again here, and he had said, but this one, I really like this question. Do you record multiple takes or the full piece or in chunks if the piece allows it? It's a good question. As far as I remember, we like to do a few whole ones if possible, and then we get into. Is that correct? Is that a standard way you recommend?
Yeah, usually, but it doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes during that first take, you just got to say, actually, I'm just going to work in that first section. Depends on the player, really, but often I'm going into a recording session not knowing the music inside out, and you got to trust the player really on their judgment on that. I think they'll know if they want to go all the way through. But a full take is great at the beginning because I get to hear it from them in the acoustics and hear how it's recording.
And not to, I think.
Don't go over and over in full takes. That sounds a bit bonkers.
You got to get into detail.
Assuming that it's going well, 3 full takes would be enough, and then focus on sections. And it's hard to do it on your own because I don't know. I'm just going to listen back.
Oh yeah, it's a mess.
Having someone else following the score and marking things off is very useful. But
of course, personally, I'm always very happy when we work on our edits. That's the other thing. We usually I go to Oxford, we do 2 days of recording, and then I stay on, and we basically sit through the main edits in the first 2 days, which is also normally this takes weeks. That's another thing I disliked with many situations. We go in there, we basically we record 2 days, it's fresh, we sit down together, we remember everything, and then of course you do a lot. But personally, I'm really proud and happy when I see just one long take, then I feel, well done, Johannes. That you know.
That color, load of green,
Yes. It's like, yes. And if you see a lot of them, you think to yourself, oh, I should have practiced more. But sometimes it can be a noise. It could be something else or breathing. So anyway, this has been...
I mean, one take might be fine, but you don't settle for that. If you've got, half a phrase from a different take, which is just better than great, it's just so good. Might as well put it in if it fits and do the same for the next phrase. You might as well get it as good as you can, because as you say, it's going to be preserved forever, and you don't have the benefits of a live environment. You're not in a concert. In a concert, anything, if things just slip by, it's fine. Little noise, breath, hitting an open string accidentally underneath, it's just gone. It happens and it's gone. But on recording, might as well aim for as high as you can, I think, if time permits. And for me, editing time is about kind of 1.5, whatever the recording time is. And so we're in the studio for 2 days, then it'd be 3 days of editing. So
and this is what people have to realize with your time, like the thing is, what you can do in those days, I have tried editing, it would take me weeks. So this is of course why do I not just say you can do it yourself? I didn't, it would take me so much time, so that it's much better to go to an expert, pay him, and it would do it not only very well, and I'm really impressed. But of course, it's a
recording session. If someone wants me to edit remotely for them, then it'd be a different matter. I don't know how that would work as such. No. Like most of my stuff remotely is just the mixing and mastering stage.
Sure, no, I think this is a great, but of course,
and that doesn't take so long. That doesn't take 2.5 or 3 days.
No, of course, no, of course. But if you can, I guess the best is to come to you. But it is great also to people to know that you have this other option, that you can send recordings to Oli. He can fix them for you. Well, Oli, this has been more than too awesome, and this was very nice for me to talk to you today, especially because, we produced so many albums together, and looking forward to at least as many coming out in the future, because I have some, whether we do CDs or Spotify, the concept of albums are still alive, and it's important. So, but Oli, this has been, thank you so much for doing this for Guitar City Talks.
Everybody.
Yes, thank you for questions.
Feel free to hit me up on Facebook on my sound engineer, audio engineer page. You can find it there.
Do that. And oh yes, I forgot about it. This is something I forgot. I was gonna subscribe. You can always forget to say that, but please do subscribe. Also to Oli, to me, the YouTube channel, wherever you are on Facebook. It's very important. And you guys, thank you so much. Let's say bye now. We're gonna stop the streaming. Bye bye.